working, and it's going to be because I don't have the microphone on. You wait. It's going to happen. I will take, as we transition today or Sunday afternoons, as we transition to the church covenant, starting today, I'd look for any of the men that want to read through the covenant for me. Go ahead, Brother Derek. Thank you. I'd like for you to turn 1 Timothy chapter 1. We remain on, we engage to be just in our dealings. And I don't know how many more weeks we have. 1 or 2, maybe 3. Not quite sure. It's a big topic. It's a broad topic. It encompasses so much of our Christian life. It is one of those topics that, as we started on Wednesday, our thoughts are the base or the springboard, the operating system of being just in our dealings with people. I want you to consider something. Let's go ahead and read 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 18. This charge I commit unto thee, son Timothy, according to the prophecies which went before on thee, that thou by them mightest war a good warfare, holding faith and a good conscience, which some, having put away concerning faith, have made shipwreck. Everybody, I want you to listen to me. I had to go away because I had this thought enter my mind this afternoon. I had to think it through, and I want you to listen to me. As we engage to be just in our dealings, we have to stop weaponizing ourselves. Weaponizing ourselves for the usage of whatever we want, and engaging to be more diligent to wage a good warfare. Waging a good warfare. That's how we're to be just in our dealings. This life is like war. Walking through life is like war. It's not easy. Sure, a lot of people make it look easy, don't they? They don't live in the reality of making things look realistic. They make it look fake and easy. But I titled this The Weaponization of Self. This charge that Paul is giving Timothy, he's saying, hold fast to the prophecies, the things that are taught. He's saying, with those prophecies, you can wage a good warfare. Now, he's sending Timothy out, or he's saying this to Timothy as a young preacher, as he's going into the ministry and the missionary work. Wage a good warfare. But us being just in our dealings, we have to be ready to be just in our dealings. It starts in the mind, as we talked about on Wednesday, and it begins to go from there. And oftentimes from the thoughts in our mind being angry or upset or agitated, we start to weaponize ourselves for war with each other, for war with the world, for war with our bosses, for war with our spouses, for war with our brothers and our sisters. We've got to be careful. Go over to Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Just one verse here. Verse 18. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good. Wisdom is better than weapons of war. You know, you think about something. You think about, just think about war in general. You can have the best weapons, the most military might, the most military power. But if you don't know how to use them, if you don't have enough wisdom to use the weapons, you don't have anything. No strong military force goes in without strategy, goes into battle without a strategy. No strong military force goes in without a plan. And so we ought to look at ourselves as a weapon that needs to be controlled, that needs to have a plan, that needs to use wisdom. Again, we get to one of those verses as you look in Ecclesiastes chapter 9. We get to one of those verses that has a contrasting point. Wisdom is better than weapons of war. Okay, so we know wisdom is good. But one sinner destroyeth much good. Just like this morning's message, unity can be destroyed by one person. When you weaponize yourself, and that's the only word that works in my head for this. If you don't control yourself, if you're not apt to get over yourself, if you're not apt to go, hey, this is where I am not good. This is what I struggle with. What's the verse, or what's the word there in verse 18 that's really important? Sinner. One sinner destroyeth much good. You can have a whole lot of people with wisdom, but one sinner destroys much good. Usually that sinner, just like I said this morning, is more focused on self than anybody else. It's not fun to be put in your place, told what to do. It's not fun, but we need it. I need it. Everything about pastoring, in case you, and I don't say this in a I don't say this in a negative way. I say this in as truthful of a way as I can. In case you don't understand, everything about pastoring is not about what Brother Austin says. It's about what the Lord says for Brother Austin to do. Every message that's preached, every vote that's brought forward, every time something comes up, it's always about submitting to what the Lord has for us to do. So it's not just about we're doing this or we're doing that. Boy, if I get in my flesh, and to go along with the title, weaponize myself, I'm going to make a mess. I'm not using wisdom. I could be that sinner that destroys much, that creates many issues. Wisdom will be superior to weapons. It needs to be used. Not being just in your dealings can be extremely harmful and dangerous. Everybody listen. You might not agree with me. Might not like what I have to say. But one thing you have to understand is we are engaging together. We are engaging together to be just in our dealings in the world. And that starts with being self-aware. Sometimes I think, again, people think I'm picking on them. I'm not. Many of you, just about all of you will come up with a comment at some point after a message like, oh, you're dealing with me on this. You knew this was going on. You had to point the finger at me, and it's all jest, and I appreciate that. I don't think any of you ever come up to me because you think I'm outrightly mad at you, because I'm not. But us not being self-aware, us not being just in our dealings, oh man, we could be in a world of trouble in a hurry. Let me ask you this. Just as we talked about our thoughts on Wednesday night, when you think about the weapons that we talk about, when I say weaponization of yourself, what are the weapons? Let me give you some. Your tongue. Body language. I've been a sales side for many years. Body language tells all. I remember many times sitting 2 foot across the desk from somebody and them not liking what I had laid out in front of them to sell them a car. And I would just call them out because their body language says they're lying to me on what they're telling me. The problem is we don't often think about our body language and ourself. We don't think about how weaponizing our own body language can be. How distant you can make yourself. How you can begin to sin against one with your own body language. Like I said, in the sales side, I spent year after year after year dealing with people that would lie to my face and their body language would tell the whole story. Sometimes I look out at some of you. Sometimes I talk to some of you after and I say, are you okay? You need this, you need that. Because your body language tells all. So if you're going to be just in your dealings, it goes more beyond your tongue. You better control yourself. If I came up here, and this is what I did, and I was going to preach. If I came up here, laid my Bible down, slung it open, put my papers on, and then started going, you might say I'm frustrated. That I look like I don't want to be up here. So why don't we act like we want to be here from time to time? Why don't we want to control ourselves? Why don't we want to understand how dangerous us throwing ourselves around from place to place can be? Because we all do it. You know how when we get angry, the first thing that goes is our physical control. I am guilty of that. Our physical control does not make us just in our dealings. If we're trying to be just in our dealings in the world, you have to consider what weapons you possess and what they can be. We've talked about our mind. We've talked about our tongue. We've talked about our body. Now your actions. Right? The old saying, actions speak louder than words. You hear that in school all the time. Oftentimes in church, you see the people have a heart problem by their actions. We ought to be careful in how we deal with God's created people. Eyes are upon you. See, just in our dealings ties directly back into walking circumspectly. I put down the sin of selfishness can often weaponize us. I believe selfishness can be a sin. It weaponizes your thoughts, your actions, causes you to not think clearly, causes you not to think of the rest of the world. We should be just in our dealings so we can be a light and lead people to Christ. Go to Matthew chapter 5. Verse 9. Matthew 5, verse 9. There's multiple sides to this. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Those words in red there by our Lord Jesus Christ. Folks, you might be the victim of one weaponizing theirself. Matthew chapter 5, verse 9 tells us that we should be a peaceable people. Listen, if you're first, I'm not going to pretend that life isn't hard getting told no, whether it's professionally, at church, at home. I'm not going to pretend that life isn't easy at times. But we get so cranked up, so ready to go. We oftentimes look like we're ready just to throw the gloves off and throw down, don't we? I mean, for lack of a better word. In Matthew, we see that we have to be a peaceable people. We have to be ready to make peace, not shoot off the weapons. Engaging in peace is difficult. But do not forget that engaging in peace is what we're striving for in unity. That brings me to the thought of turning the other cheek. Listen, if you're led by the Spirit, if the Spirit is in you, and somebody in this room makes you mad, you should have the power to turn the other cheek. And then turn it again. And then turn it again. 70 times 7. We have to be peaceful. We have to want to be a peacemaker. That means no matter how difficult it is, I remember, I think probably the most accurate explanation of this word that I can give you, of being a peaceable people. The most accurate explanation I can give you is what my wife and I were talking about for the last couple days. Young marriage. It's going to apply to a large percent of everybody in the room. My wife and I had to learn to be peaceable with each other. Because I was hard-headed. And so is she. And we learned it's just much easier that no matter how difficult of something that needed to be said, it's better to say it out loud than try to make peace with it. But see, that takes both sides. That means you say it with love and you try to make peace with it. Not say it out of anger and promote more anger. Men will always control your house better by doing things peaceably, by doing things patiently, but doing them. We talked about, how much we had to learn. I don't have to share all of the convictions. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's so many things that my wife and I felt like we had to learn when we got married. And by God's grace, we did. And in those things, we had burdens, we had ways that we felt it was best to please the Lord, but we knew we had to be just in our dealings with each other, which took a lot of work. I was under the impression, I got married April 19th, 2014. I was under the impression that all men didn't have it figured out. This is how naive and ignorant I was. I was under the impression that men would just say, oh, happy wife, happy life. I'm like, well, that just means that they're not leading their house. And so I thought ruling with an iron fist was the best way to do things. Well, I learned quickly that doesn't work. It didn't work. And leading by example worked a lot better. And leading by the example of the Bible worked a lot better. So my wife and I had to learn to be just in our dealings with each other. Because there was many silent fights, long pauses, Brother Matt smiling. It's like we've been through it from time to time. Those long pauses of no conversation. Deafening pauses of no conversation at times. But you learn in that marriage is very much like our engagement to be just in our dealings, that it's totally giving yourself up to be at peace with one another, to be striving together to go in the same direction. And sometimes I fear often that sometimes in marriage, two people aren't going in the same direction. One is trying to go one way, one is trying to go the other. And the only direction we should be going to is the Lord. There's two people. Sometimes the man isn't doing what he's supposed to, and the woman needs to just try to help bring him back. And that's wrong for our men to do, but one way or the other, you got to be going to serve the Lord. That's how you're just in your dealings. In the same book, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 16, we see, let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Let me ask you just a question. I'm going to give you maybe 10 seconds of silence to think on it. I'm going to read this again. Let your light so shine before men. Stop. You with me? Did you hear what I said? That they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Did you do anything to deserve salvation? Did you do anything to get chosen to salvation? Are you worthy of anything? No. So here's my question. How's your light doing? How's your light doing? How bright's your light? Are you burning dim or are you burning bright? Is your light out? Because as it says in this verse, one of the ways that we display just in our dealings is how well our light is shining before men. And our light shines to glorify God. Problem is, I've preached to many hard hearts over the years. I've preached to many people that never think they're wrong, living in a false reality, angry as they could be at me. Your living should be evident. When you leave this building, those candlesticks, they go with you wherever you go. Are you lighting up the community? You know, you think about light. What does light do? It gives you the ability to see. If I was, now I've figured it out by now, I figured out that I can come step on each side of the pulpit, hang my feet out, and I'm not probably going to fall. I've stood in this pulpit enough. I know the water spill wrinkles, as Brother Lafferty said he can help take care for me. I know about where the steps are, so if the lights go off, I can get down from this pulpit. But if the lights go out in an unfamiliar place, can you find your way around? Our lights are not meant to go out. Our light should be leading people to Christ. How bright are you burning? You know, maybe your light isn't really accepted where it's at. Maybe people don't want your light. Keep on trying to burn. We sang that kid's song, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine." Hide it under a bushel? No, I'm going to let it shine. There's too many of us trying to hide our lights under a bushel because we're afraid to walk and let them shine. How can we expect our kids to sing that song if we're not living it ourselves? You see, if you treat someone in this world unfairly, are you showing the light of Christ? Or are you showing the darkness of sin? If we were to flip back into Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 18, when it talks about one sinner can ruin. And I'm paraphrasing, of course. It just takes one. It's so, it just takes so much for us to pay attention to being just in our dealings. I gave you the analogy on Wednesday of people that would come and they trade in a car that they know had a blown motor. Or many other problems. And you know what? It's oftentimes what we try to do the same thing, wouldn't we? Because we don't want to be honest about those things. That's not being just in our dealings. When our van messed up, transmission messed up, I sold it at the auction. I put in the disclosure, trans shutter, which is basically a fancy word for saying it misses. And I'm like, I remember, I got $6,000 more than what I expected by just being honest. You don't know what the Lord's going to do. Man, our living, it should be evident before men that we're Christians, not evident the other way. See, that weaponization of self. Aren't we always ready for battle? And not in a good way. Aren't we always ready to throw down? Aren't we always ready to take care of business? Aren't we always ready to make excuses? We're not always ready to use wisdom and honesty. Trying to figure out how I'm going to engage in this. I have that's point 1 of 6. Go to Proverbs 17. We talked in point 1 about being just in our dealings with the world. Now I want to hone in and maybe just get this started. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 17, it says, "A friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity." A friend loveth at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. We fail. So often we fail at being just with our brethren. See these people in this room? I don't normally encourage you to look around during church, but it might be best today if you look around. Because often the people in this room are the ones that get on each other's nerves more than anything, right? Don't we? And I'm being real. I mean, you can laugh, you can chuckle. Not any one of us lines up the same way. We're built different, we're wired different, we act different, we frustrate each other, we drive each other crazy, but we should love each other. And that love should make us act civil. That love should make us respect each other. It says, "A friend loveth at all times, but a brother is born for adversity." Do you see what's in this room? Brothers and sisters. Born for adversity. If we're striving together in unity, we're born for adversity. You ever been through some adversity in the church? You ever been through great difficulty in the church? You ever been through times in the church where one isn't wanting to be honest with the other? A friend loveth at all times means that he'll deal with you fairly. But boy, fairly doesn't always mean it's fair to your favor. It might mean it's exactly what you deserve. Friends and brothers, they'll tell you exactly what you deserve. And I pray that if I get crazy or sideways, or if I do something, I pray that somebody will sit me down and say, this is what you deserve. Now let me help you through it. Let's keep your light shining. Because dealing with each other justly doesn't always mean you're going to get a dozen roses or you're going to get some great reward for what you've done. If you ask for wisdom from a brother or sister, if you ask for wisdom and you can't refute the wisdom with the Scripture, then take the wisdom, as difficult as it is. If you can't refute it, if you can't find a way to say that it's wrong, then take the wisdom. You see, that's a tripping point, in churches today. Well, what would you do in this situation? I've got this going on. What would you do? Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do this and this. No, I don't want to do that. I don't think that's right. I don't like the cost. I don't like what it's going to do to me here. I don't like what it's going to do to me there. Tough luck. Can you find that it's wrong? See, what we want is we want the Bible to say it's going to be just in our dealings. We need to be just in our dealings, which means we're never wrong. We're never uncomfortable. We're never to the point where we have to do this or that. That's not what fairness and being just in your dealings means. It means that you're honest, that you tell your brother or sister what they need to hear, and you back it up by your living and your graciousness. And as I go on to the next thing, you don't seek to take advantage of somebody's position of needing wisdom. You don't seek to offend them in giving them advice or wisdom. When you seek to be just in your dealings with your brethren, you must stand in the part of neutrality. I think that's the right word. Neutrality. See, I did it again. I looked over at Sister Ellie. I got the head shake. I knew I was fine. I like having English teachers because it's just not natural to my brain. We ought to be neutral. I'm telling you this because you're wrong, brother, but I want to pray for you. Or, brother, I'm telling you this because you asked me and you're wrong. Now, brother, what do you think about this for me? I mean, we have to be humbly before our faces to be just in our dealings. We have to be humble before our faces, before the Lord, seeking help. Don't seek to offend each other. I promise you all, with everything within my being, and I mean this as sincerely as I can say it, I do not stand in this pulpit and seek to offend you. I do not stand in this pulpit and take pride in knowing that there's things that are wrong in your life, and I have to preach on them. I have to explain them in person, in a public setting. I have to sit there through the times where I can tell that you don't want me to talk about it, but I have to talk about it. But I do not seek to offend you. I do not seek to make you upset. You don't understand the difficulty of having to preach and deliver a message that you know goes directly against the grain of somebody that's already angry. But I don't fear you who are angry. I fear God. And what my consequence would be if I wasn't honest with you. So I'll preach through the no amens, the angry scowls, the difficulties. But I preach and I say what I say out of love and respect. And if you don't take it from the point of me preaching what I preach out of love and respect, then I pray you'll see it. I pray the Lord will change your heart. I pray the Lord will make you understand how incredibly difficult it is to stand up and deliver some of these things. But I don't fear you, and I'll keep on preaching. A friend will love a true friend. You know, I don't know if I want to box this one in 8 minutes. One of my favorite message series of all time from Pastor Randy Titus was one of the best series of messages I will never forget. The meaning of a friend. See, let me tell you something. Being just in your dealings is hard when you're dealing with people. And quite frankly, when you look around the room, this is meant to be funny, so you can laugh, you don't have to, but when you look around the room, we put up with each other, don't we? We do. Poor Miss Amanda puts up with Brother Brian telling her cooking's falling off the wagon, but I mean, going downhill. I think he said off the wagon, but we're not going to argue that right now. But things like that, we put up with each other, don't we? But let me tell you something. This world makes you young people think that you have to have this big collective group of friends. This makes you and I feel like we have to have friends or people that we fit in with. It's not so. You adults, how many of you, you can raise your hand, how many of you still have close contact with a friend from high school? A little less than half, what? Five of you. How many of you have close contact with more than 2 friends from high school? 1 person. And I was going to raise my hand, but I don't have any. My last close contact worked for me, and I haven't talked to him really but 2 times since we moved. We grew up together. He used to go to church with me from time to time. Kids, adults, whoever needs to hear this, you don't have to have a group full of friends to support your life. You don't. The problem with this world is they think that you got men, and I pick on men, you got men who think that life is a party, that they need to have friends, that they got to figure out what they're doing on Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. And they have no real responsibility. They have no want to be responsible. They have no want to take care of their family. You have them that want to go golfing every Saturday morning and every Tuesday evening at the local golf course for men's league and not take care of their family so they can hang out with their friends and drink alcohol and make some stupid decisions, for lack of a better word. Dealing justly is also going to remove you from some people. Because you just, in our mental makeup, you can't deal with them justly because you want to put the boxing gloves on. A true friend is going to love in adversity and as well as honesty. It takes true friends or friend to find out who's loyal to you. A true friend is like ivy. The greater the ruin, the closer they are to you. Now, let me tell you this. Your greatest friend should be your spouse. It should be your spouse. That's who you should cling to. Make you stronger. The Lord can bless you with some great people. I have 2 back home. I went there. Sorry. Brother Matt usually gives me the sideways look when I say back home. 30 years is back home. This is home now. That was home back then. I have 2 of them back home. But it took me 25 years to have 2 true friends. And kids, I'm here to tell you that you can make it through life without any friends. I promise you. Because the ones that say they're friends are really not going to be. And if we were to do a survey would say that for the 5 or 6 of you that raised your hand that have contact, 5 years from now, there's not going to be that many hands up. That weaponizing of self, folks, that means in the wise words of my wife, when my kids are just not obeying for the day, if I call her on the phone and I check on her, the wise words of my wife, this is weaponizing oneself, should say, you better check yourself before you wreck yourself. Boy, do we need to hear that from time to time, don't we? Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Why? Go back to Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Verse 18. Wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroyeth much good. Weaponizing yourself, you better check yourself. You better lean into wisdom. I pray that God makes our minds lean to wisdom and not to offense. I pray that God makes us desire not to be the sinner that destroys much good. Like I said, my wife will say, check yourself before you wreck yourself. If we're not just in our dealings, if we don't use our tongue correctly, if we don't use our body language correctly, I want you to think about that. The next time you go through life, and I'm bad at it, I tell you, everything I learned in sales was to use my body language to sell cars. I was a natural, I talked way too much as a kid. I never stopped talking. I didn't. And I would, I'd say something I'd regret. I'd put my foot in my mouth. I had no wisdom of words. And so when I went into sales, it was my livelihood. That was how I provided for my family. And I learned really quickly to be quiet, to listen, to use my body language to direct the sale as I wanted it based off of theirs. That I could say less and do more with my actions. The problem is too often we use that body language to be a distraction and distract our light. I'll leave you with this thought in closing. Think about light for a second. Your light's meant to see, to glorify God, right? So if you're holding your light and you're dancing all around, or you're using your body language and you're throwing a fit, or you're upset, and you keep blocking the light from people because you can't sit still, because you can't control yourself, you're being a distraction. And you're not showing people the light. Stop being selfish. Kids, I always talk about how much I love you all and how much I appreciate you all and how much I remember being in your shoes. You don't need a bunch of friends. Kids are cruel. They're not raised well. They're not raised to respect you. They're not raised to care about you. Go where you're respected. And parents, that better be at home. Because if they don't find love and respect at home, that's only natural for them to want to find it, and they're going to try to go find it somewhere else. So think about that. Be just in your dealings, everybody. Let us dismiss in a word of prayer. Make sure to remember.